Hey everybody, it's Mega Lake Bodum back here again with another top 5 list. I got thinking about what I wanted my next top 5 list to be, and I got thinking about kind of dual-based, player-based games with creatures and whatnot. I'm talking about like Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh! And what they have in their games are what they call mass removal or board wipes. Basically, in my definition of a mass removal, it's like sort of a powerful spell or creature that comes down, removes a bunch of dudes, and allows you to kind of completely change the board state. Now in Kaijudo, they kind of represent their mass removals differently, but they do have some mass removals and pseudo mass removals that I'm going to talk about here. And I'm just going to go over 5 of them, my picks, 5 in a particular order that I feel, they've got the best sort of idea towards mass removal. I might get some negative feedback on some of these, but keep in mind this is just my opinion, and this is just how I see mass removal in Kaijudo. So let's get to the list. I'm going to start off with number 5, which I believe to be Storm Spark Blast. I might get some negative feedback on this one, but Storm Spark Blast really, to me, is sort of a pseudo mass removal. It's not really removal per se because it doesn't actually remove anything. It just taps all the creatures down, and in order to remove your opponent's creatures, you have to have creatures to attack into them. Storm Spark Blast, of course, is meant to be, I understand, the Wrath of God for Kaijudo, but it comes across as that in certain ways. It's definitely a lifesaver at some points, and it's definitely a pain in the ass in other points. But Storm Spark Blast, to me, just doesn't seem to be a mass removal. I get how it works. It does target everything on your opponent's field. It does mass tap all the creatures, but it's still not mass removal because the creatures are still there, unless you remove them with your own creatures. But still, I think Storm Spark Blast deserved a spot on this list as being mass removal because it is such a great card, and it does help in so many situations. And yeah, you wouldn't go wrong to run a Storm Spark Blast in a deck that runs light. Get to an actual removal card. Number 4, I believe to be Drill Storm. Now, Drill Storm is that red 5-drop Shield Blast that allows you to banish target enemy creature that has power 3,000 or less, and then banish all enemy creatures that have power 1,000 or less. Why is Drill Storm handy? Well, Drill Storm's handy because it's got that, first of all, it takes down a 3,000 power creature. This can let you take down stuff like the Kraken, and you can hit stuff like Scare Adorable of Gloom Hollow, Screeching Scare Adorable, stuff like that. But then banish all enemy creatures that have power 1,000 or less. In some of the decks nowadays, like Light Water Nature Tempo and Light Water Dark, stuff like that. Basically, it's gonna hit smaller dudes. I mean, with the 1,000, you're gonna be able to take down the Scamp and the Magris and Megabugs, like the Tick and Manapod Beetle. Just stuff like that. It's gonna hit Essence Elf too for some of the decks that run Essence Elf as their 2-drop nature creature. Drill Storm is just versatile because it takes down that 3,000, and then it can actually wipe the board if it's playing like lower creatures. Against Megabugs, Drill Storm is not a bad card by any means. It's going to take down the Tick and the Manapod Beetle. So right there, you're killing 2 of the creatures that you really see a lot of in Megabugs. So Drill Storm, I think, definitely deserves a little bit higher than Storm Spark. Definitely comment if you don't believe so, but I think Drill Storm is just, for mass removal, it's a little bit better than Storm Spark. And for number 3, I'm going to get into another spell, Tendril Grasp, which of course has 6-drop nature spell with a Shield Blast. And what it does, it puts all the creatures that are level 3 or less from the battle zone into their owner's mana zones. So this is kind of a double-edged sword. This, to me, is quintessential mass removal because it wipes the entire board. This is basically the Wrath of God and Dark Hole for level 3 creatures. Tendril Grasp is great in that it's going to remove, decks that are playing like, like I said, once again, Megabugs. Megabugs will get hit pretty hard. You'll take down the bugs. Stuff like Scamp. You're going to hit Sword Horns. It's going to get into the Lost Patrols. It doesn't target, so it will take down the Turnip. The only issue with Tendril Grasp is that it's going to hit your creatures too. I've seen a lot of, control decks that run nature as well play Tendril Grasp. And what Tendril Grasp is actually going to do for them is not such a bad thing, because it's going to send stuff like their Strider, maybe their Scare Adorable and Gloom Hollow into the mana zone, Lemon, which would end up in the mana zone anyway. It's going to take those, put them in their mana zone, and it's going to ramp them. I've seen Tendril Grasp ran in Haven decks that use Reap and Sow and Sprout to sort of ramp. Tendril Grasp is a pseudo-ramp as well. It allows you to take your creatures, wipe your opponent's board, and take your creatures, put them in the mana zone, give you some extra mana. So Tendril Grasp, sort of a double-edged sword. I really think it's viable, to be honest with you, and I don't think it sees enough play. But a lot of decks that run nature are also running stuff like Prickleback and Sword Horn and other shit like that. What's going to happen when you run Tendril Grasp in a deck that you run smaller dudes is you're just going to wipe your board too. So Tendril Grasp I think is viable. I think it does need more attention in decks. Unfortunately, nature's still one of that kind of held back civilizations of the game. So you're not seeing a lot of nature decks right now, but Tendril Grasp I still think is viable. I'm going to move up to number 2 now, which is a creature, and I think is actually one of the best mass removals in the game, and that's Queen Kalima. Of course, that's that Dark Monarch. She's a 10-drop. She's 16,000 power. She's a triple breaker. But it's the Gaze into the Abyss ability that I really like, and that's where the mass removal comes in. Because when she comes into the battle zone, you may put the top 3 cards of your deck in your discard pile. For each darkness card put into your discard pile this way, your opponent chooses one of his or her creatures in the battle zone. Banish those creatures. Why I think Queen Kalima is so great is because your opponent chooses. So it's going to get over hexproof, which means your opponent's going to have to either, if you're playing, let's say, a control mirror match, because we all know Kalima control is still a thing right now. And there's decks built on getting those 3 darks off the top, forcing your opponent to banish 3 creatures. This is going to make your opponent sack stuff like Keeper Laws, your Turnips, and your King Neptuses, and Haven. Even Haven. Your opponent would have to sack Haven. And what that does is it gets over hexproof and forces your opponent to sack creatures. I like that she's mass removal. Maybe you'd argue that 3 is not really mass, but I think 3 is a decent number to be hitting at this point in time. 3 for sure guys that are gone once you mill 3 darks off the top seems pretty good, but it's mass removal on a stick. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think mass removal on a stick is pretty freaking good. Not only do you remove your opponent's field, but you get freaking 16,000 power triple breaker with the ability to reanimate the dark cards you milled from the top. Then it's got that Darkness Monarch card ability as well. That seems pretty freaking good. Queen Kalima, you can also talk about the Mark of Kalima, which is sort of a watered down Queen Kalima. It's that 8-drop spell that pretty much does the same thing as her and puts her into the battle zone. But I mean, I guess if you combine Mark of Kalima with Kalima, that's pretty freaking good. That's mass removal at its finest. But I still think Queen Kalima, I mean, obviously Queen Kalima is very viable. Kalima Control is definitely a thing out there, and she's one of the best mass removal cards in the game. But I don't believe her to be the best mass removal card in the game. What I lean towards more, and I'm a little bit biased because I love Leviathan Control, I'm going to have to say King Coral is probably one of the best, if not the best, and I'm putting him at the best spot on my list for mass removal. King Coral is that 7-drop Leviathan with 5,000 power, which, really isn't that great, but it's the Tail Smash ability. Whenever this creature or one of your other Leviathans enters the battle zone, return all creatures that are level 4 or less from the battle zone to their owner's hand. The best thing about this guy is that he's so tribal. He's a Leviathan, and not only does he trigger his ability, but when you play other Leviathans as well, his ability triggers. Now, Leviathans aren't the smallest guys in the world, but once you've hit King Coral mana, you can pretty much pay for the majority of the other Leviathans. The ability to bounce your opponent and your creatures back to your hand is pretty sweet because it removes your opponent's field, and then it can give you access to stuff like Fumes, stuff like Screeching Scare Adorable, and you can reuse those creatures. You can play Fumes again, you can play Screeching Scare Adorable again. Level 4 seems to be sort of that mid-range where creatures go from sort of okay to pretty damn good. You're looking at stuff like Keeper of Laws and Screeching Scare Adorable, Fumes. Stuff like that. Level 4 seems to be where it's at. Level 4 is some of the best creatures and spells in that area, and King Coral forces them back to the hand. Against an aggro deck, you can't go wrong with his Tail Smash ability, because with Light Water Nature really making a splash out there in the meta right now, he bounces the majority of their field, because the only thing they really play that are so high are stuff like Lyra, Blinder Beetle Prime, and Finbar. So King Coral is going to bounce Sword Horn and their other creatures back to the hand, and you won't have to worry about that. But then you look at King Coral, and then you think about the Squalashi Scourge combo as well, because Squalashi Scourge, can't pronounce it, Squalashi Scourge makes it extremely viable, because Squalashi Scourge come down, King Coral activates, and then your opponent discards their hand. You discard your hand too, but that's not that bad because when we're playing Squalashy Scourge, it's usually in a way to win. But that combo is crazy. I love playing that combo, and that's one of my reasons I love why I think Control is because it's so broken, especially against the mid-range decks nowadays. So King Coral, I believe to be the top. I don't know. People are probably going to argue against me. Go, oh, Kalima should be on top because she's so huge. She's a removal on a stick and it's sacrifice. King Coral just bounces him back to the hand. Your opponent can play him next turn. Yeah, that's true, but at the same time, King Coral and the Squalashy Scourge combo is fucking crazy. And people think, well, it doesn't go off as much as it should, and it does. It goes off pretty good. If you're playing Leviathan Control, it goes off pretty efficiently in most games. There's the odd game where you're not going to find a King Coral or a Squalashy Scourge, or you'll find a King Coral and they'll remove it before you hit with Squalashy Scourge, but whatever. It's still a house. It's still great. It's removal on a stick. It's King Coral, in my opinion, is the best mass removal we have right now. When we get these spells in 5 Mystics, we might get some better mass removal. But for now, these are my top 5 mass removal. Like, comment, share. Let me know. Well, subscribe as well. Let me know if you think I'm completely off base with these cards. But I believe these. I was just thinking the other day, I believe these guys to be the top mass removal in the game right now. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys, and take care. Bye.